Okay, so get this, listeners. We are diving into ancient Rome today, but also some seriously cutting-edge science.
Yeah, get this. We're talking Roman Empire meets modern technology.
And it's a discovery so big that they actually had to reroute a whole subway line.
Oh, yeah, that's a pretty big deal.
Pretty big. Intrigued.
I hope so.
I am. We're doing a deep dive today into this article from the University of Oulu in Finland, titled Unlocking Roman Secrets: How Modern Science Analyzes Ancient Wood.
And the thing is, the modern science in question is something you might think about more if you're, at the hospital than if you're thinking about, like, archaeology.
Right.
We're talking about NMR, nuclear magnetic resonance.
That's MRI technology.
Exactly. And it's helping scientists uncover these secrets from Roman wooden structures that are almost 1,700 years old.
That is wild. You might be wondering, how could anything made of wood last that long?
Good question.
Especially underwater.
Well, in 2004, during excavations for a new metro line in Naples, archaeologists came across these remarkably well-preserved Roman structures, and they were submerged in water.
Underwater.
Totally underwater. And the water actually acted as a preservative, like it prevented the wood from decaying in the way that it would have in open air.
Fascinating.
And the presence of an aquifer in this specific location played a really key role in preserving these ancient treasures. But get this, the find was so important that they actually rerouted the metro line to run beneath these archaeological gems.
That's what I'm talking about. A discovery big enough to change a subway.
Yeah.
It's like finding a perfectly preserved shipwreck.
Right.
But instead of a ship, it's an entire section of a Roman harbor.
Amazing, yeah.
I'm picturing this bustling scene, right? Ships are coming and going, traders are shouting, and there's this wooden pier right in the middle of it all.
Yeah.
It's crazy to think that we can actually use technology like NMR to learn more about the lives of the people who built these structures and used them almost 2,000 years ago.
I know. It's kind of like having a time machine. But instead of physically going back in time, we're using these scientific tools to see into the past.
That is so cool.
Yeah.
So how does NMR work on these ancient wooden artifacts? I mean, it's not like they can just stick a piece of wood that's 1,700 years old into an MRI machine.
Well, you're right. It's definitely more complicated than that.
Yeah.
But the basic principle is the same. NMR uses radio waves to analyze the magnetic properties of atomic nuclei, and that gives scientists incredibly detailed information about the structure and properties of materials, in this case, ancient wood.
Wow.
What's also really cool is that NMR is non-invasive, which means it doesn't damage these precious artifacts.
Oh, that's good.
Which is super important because this waterlogged wood is really, really fragile.
Yeah, makes sense.
So you could think of it as like a gentle giant of scientific tools,
Oh, I like that.
It's powerful enough to reveal some mind-blowing details, but still gentle enough to not harm these very delicate pieces of the past.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
So the article mentioned that they didn't just use one type of NMR.
You're right. They used 4.
They used 4 different techniques: relaxometry, microimaging, diffusometry, and cryoporometry. And to be totally honest, those words are a little intimidating.
I know. They sound pretty technical, huh? But think about it like this. Each one is like a different piece of a puzzle, and it helps paint a more complete picture of, like, the wood's history and its properties,
Okay, I like that analogy.
Yeah.
So break these techniques down for me one by one.
Sure.
What can you tell us about relaxometry?
Okay, so imagine you're squeezing a sponge. Relaxometry is kind of like that. It measures how quickly water molecules in the wood relax after they've been exposed to a magnetic field. And this tells us about the density and porosity of the wood, which can show us how it's changed over time.
Oh, interesting. So it's kind of like measuring the sponginess of the wood.
Exactly.
To understand how its structure has been affected by, centuries of being underwater.
Right. And then there's microimaging, which is a little more straightforward. It's basically taking very, very detailed pictures of the wood's internal structure that lets researchers see things like, cell walls, growth rings, even tiny cracks or defects.
So it's like having a microscopic view of the wood, revealing details that we wouldn't be able to see with just our eyes.
Right. Now, next up we have diffusometry. Think of this as like tracking how water molecules move through the wood.
Oh, okay.
And this tells us about the wood's cellular structure and how it's changed over time because of decay or other factors.
So it's like observing the wood's, plumbing system.
Yeah, kind of.
To see how the water has flowed through it over centuries.
Exactly. And then there's that last technique, cryoporometry.
Which sounds super complex.
I know. It sounds complex, but it's actually a pretty simple concept. Cryoporometry involves freezing the water in the wood and then observing how it melts.
Interesting.
And by measuring how the melting changes with temperature, researchers can figure out the size and distribution of pores within the wood.
So it's kind of like using a teeny tiny ice cube tray to measure the size of the pores in the wood.
Yeah, I like that. That's a great way to think about it.
So we've got relaxometry, microimaging, diffusometry, and cryoporometry. Each one of those gives us a totally unique piece of the puzzle.
Yes.
And they all help researchers understand how this wood has changed over time. But what I find so fascinating is that this isn't just about taking cool pictures of old pieces of wood.
Oh, it's so much more than that.
It's about uncovering the secrets of history and understanding how things were made and used,
Right. By understanding how the word's structure has changed because of decay, researchers can come up with even better ways to preserve these artifacts so they can be around for future generations.
Like preventative medicine, but for ancient wood.
Yeah, exactly. They're trying to understand how the wood has aged and figure out if they can slow down or even reverse the effects of time. But to do that, they need a baseline, right? A way to compare this ancient wood with fresh wood of the same species.
Makes sense.
So what they did was they took their ancient wood samples, which included spruce, chestnut, and maple, and they compared them with fresh wood of those same species. And this gives them a before and after picture spanning centuries that shows how wood degrades over time.
That is so cool. And the article mentions that the wood isn't always, uniform, right? It can vary depending on the tree's age, the species, and even where the sample came from in the trunk. So how do scientists deal with all of those different variables?
Well, that's one of the biggest challenges when you're working with natural materials like wood, right? There's inherent variability, and that's why analyzing a lot of samples is really important.
Oh,
If they have more data, then their analysis will be more accurate.
I see. So it's like a detective working on a case.
Hmm?
The more evidence they gather, the clearer the whole picture becomes.
That's a great way to put it.
And speaking of evidence, the article also mentioned something about using portable NMR devices. Can you imagine
I know.
a team of scientists going on an archaeological dig with their portable NMR scanners, analyzing artifacts right there in the field?
That would be incredible. And think about how much safer the artifacts would be. It would really minimize the risk of damage during transport.
Absolutely.
And then you could analyze artifacts on site in their original context, and that could give us even richer insights.
It would be like having this scientific detective kit that can unlock all the secrets hidden within these objects from the past.
Okay, we've covered a lot of ground here. We've talked about the discovery of these really incredible Roman structures, how the water helped preserve them, the science behind NMR and its 4 different techniques, and even the possibility of portable NMR devices changing the world of archaeology.
That's a lot.
It's a lot, but I have a feeling this is just the start.
I think you're right.
What other secrets can NMR help us uncover? That is a great question, and it's one that we are going to dig into in our next segment.
Ooh, a cliffhanger.
Stay tuned, listeners, because NMR can do a whole lot more than just look at old pieces of wood.
We'll be right back after a quick break to explore those very exciting possibilities. Welcome back, everyone. Before the break, we were talking about portable NMR devices and how they could totally revolutionize archaeology.
I know, it's so cool to think about.
But you mentioned that NMR has applications way beyond just looking at old pieces of wood. What else can it do?
Oh, so much. It's actually kind of mind-blowing.
Okay, I'm ready to have my mind blown. Hit me with it.
All right, so get this. A technology that was developed for medical imaging has now become this super versatile tool
Okay.
with applications in fields like environmental monitoring, battery material analysis,
Great.
even studying eco-concrete and catalysts.
Wow, that is a lot.
It's a lot, right?
Okay, so let's unpack all of that.
Let's do it.
Starting with environmental monitoring.
Yeah.
How can NMR help us understand the environment?
Okay, well, think about it this way. NMR can be used to analyze the composition of things like soil, water, even air.
No way.
It can detect pollutants, track how water and nutrients move around, and even monitor changes in the atmosphere.
So it's basically like this super sensitive sensor that can give us like a really detailed picture of what's going on in the environment at like a molecular level.
You got it. And all of that information is super important for understanding environmental changes. For example, we can use it to figure out the impact of human activity on the environment and develop ways to be more sustainable.
That makes a lot of sense. Okay, so what about analyzing battery materials? Why is NMR important for that?
Well, batteries are, a hot topic these days.
Understatement.
Right. Everyone's talking about electric cars and, renewable energy storage and all that. So NMR is playing a really key role in developing new and better battery materials because it can analyze the structure and composition of those materials. So scientists can figure out how they function and identify areas for improvement.
So it's basically like scientists have this microscopic tool that lets them tinker with, like, the very building blocks of batteries.
Exactly.
Wild.
And by optimizing these materials, we can create batteries that are, more efficient, they last longer, and they're also safer.
Very important. Okay, so what about this eco-concrete thing? That sounds super futuristic. What is it, and what does NMR have to do with it?
All right, so eco-concrete is a type of concrete that's designed to be much more sustainable and environmentally friendly than traditional concrete.
So, like, better for the planet.
Yeah, much better. They often use recycled materials and less cement, which is a big contributor to carbon emissions, actually.
Interesting.
And so what NMR does is it helps analyze the composition and structure of that eco-concrete so you can make sure that what you end up with is strong, durable, and, it meets all the environmental standards.
So it's kind of like a quality control system.
Yeah.
For eco-friendly construction materials.
I like that.
Okay, last one on our list, catalysts. Remind me what catalysts are, and then tell me how NMR is used to study them.
All right, so catalysts are basically substances that help to speed up chemical reactions. They're used all the time in tons of different industrial processes.
Got it.
And NMR helps scientists study those catalysts because it gives them really detailed information about their structure, how they interact with other molecules, and how they might change over time.
So it's like watching a chemical reaction happen in slow motion.
Yeah.
And understanding, like, the catalyst's role at a molecular level.
Exactly. And having that knowledge is super important for designing better catalysts that are more efficient, more targeted.
Yeah.
And that can actually help to make industrial processes way more sustainable and environmentally friendly.
Wow, that's incredible. It's amazing how one technology can be used to study so many different things.
It is, right.
So we've talked about how NMR is used for things like monitoring the environment, developing new battery materials, and even creating eco-friendly construction. But what about studying other historical artifacts? I mean, we've been focusing on these Roman structures, but what about other things from the past? You mentioned this doctoral thesis from the University of Oulu that looked into some other applications of NMR. What did they find?
Yeah, so that thesis highlighted some really interesting uses of NMR in preserving cultural heritage. For example, NMR can be used to analyze ancient manuscripts.
Right.
Yeah, you can actually use it to study how parchment and paper have degraded over time, and that helps conservators figure out the best ways to preserve them.
Oh, that's so cool. So it's like a non-invasive way to diagnose the health of those super precious documents.
Exactly.
And then come up with ways to prevent them from, falling apart.
Exactly.
That's amazing. What else?
The thesis also talked about how NMR can be used to study the composition and aging of varnishes and paints that were used in old artworks.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, and that can help art restorers figure out the best ways to conserve those pieces, to make sure that they're preserving the original integrity of the artwork.
Wow, so it's like this scientific toolkit that allows us to not only understand the past,
right,
but also to actually protect it, to safeguard those pieces of history for future generations.
Exactly. It's pretty remarkable.
It seems like the possibilities with NMR are basically endless. What are some of the things that researchers are most excited about for the future of this technology?
One area that people are really excited about is the idea of miniaturizing NMR instruments. We talked about portable NMR devices earlier.
Right, taking them out into the field.
Yeah, exactly. But imagine handheld NMR scanners.
Wow.
That you could take anywhere.
So instead of a big machine in a lab, you have something you could just carry around in a backpack.
Exactly. It would be like Star Trek stuff, And think about all the fields you could use that in. Archaeology for sure, but also medicine, food analysis, materials science. The possibilities are truly endless.
It sounds like we're on the verge of a scientific revolution.
It's a really exciting time to be paying attention to these advancements, that's for sure. And the speed of innovation in the field of NMR is just unbelievable. Who knows what other amazing applications we'll be talking about in a few years. It's incredible what humans can do when we put our minds to it. It's all about that curiosity,
Yeah. The desire to learn and to explore.
Exactly. Never stop exploring. Who knows what we'll discover next.
That is a perfect note to end on. So we've gone from the bottom of a Roman harbor to the cutting edge of scientific innovation, all thanks to NMR technology. We've seen how this amazing tool can help us unlock the secrets of the past, solve problems in the present, and build a better future. But remember, listeners, exploration doesn't stop here. There's a whole world of knowledge waiting to be discovered.
It's out there.
So keep asking questions, stay curious, and never stop exploring. You never know what amazing discoveries are waiting for you just around the corner. Until next time, keep diving deep. It really is amazing to think about how a technology that started out for medical imaging has become so important for scientific discovery. And not just in one field.
It's true. It really shows you how connected science is, like how a breakthrough in one area can lead to all these unexpected uses in totally different areas. It's proof that the best innovations come from people thinking outside the box.
Exactly. And you know what I find really fascinating? How NMR is almost like a bridge, between the past and the future.
That's a great point.
We were talking about using it to analyze ancient artifacts.
Right.
But then we also talked about its role in developing cutting-edge stuff like new battery materials and eco-friendly construction. It's like with NMR, we can understand where we came from and also shape where we're going at the same time.
I like that. It's like NMR is giving us this deeper understanding of the world, like not just its history, but its potential too. And knowing all of that helps us make better decisions about how we interact with the environment and how we build a better future for everyone.
So as we kind of wrap up this deep dive into NMR, what's the one big takeaway you hope our listeners will remember?
I think the biggest thing to remember is just the power of scientific curiosity.
Yeah.
And how important it is to think in an interdisciplinary way. NMR is like the perfect example of that.
It really is.
When we combine what we know from different areas of science, and we approach these problems with a really open mind, that's when we make these big discoveries that can change the world.
I totally agree. It's like a reminder that science isn't just about memorizing stuff from a textbook or doing experiments in a lab. It's about exploring, collaborating with other people, always pushing the boundaries of what we know and what we think is possible.
Yeah, I love that. And I would also add that science is a journey, not a destination.
Oh, that's good.
It's always changing, always growing.
Right.
There's always something new to learn, new questions to ask, and new discoveries to be made.
That's a perfect thought to end on. So we started this journey in the depths of an ancient Roman harbor and ended up at the very edge of scientific innovation. And it was all thanks to NMR technology. We've seen how this incredible tool is helping us unlock the secrets of the past, solve today's problems, and create a better future. But remember, the journey doesn't end here. There's so much more to learn. There's a whole world of knowledge just waiting to be discovered.
I can't wait to see what we discover next.
Me too. So keep asking questions, stay curious, and never stop exploring. You never know, you might just stumble upon the next big breakthrough. That's it for this deep dive. Until next time, keep exploring.